Good afternoon. The first business is general questions. I'd like members to try to keep the questions as short as possible, and I'm sure ministers will reciprocate by having the answers as succinct as possible. Question number 1, Claudia Beamish.
Sorry, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what provisions for cycle access and storage on trains and at stations will be included in the contract for rail passenger services to be issued in 2014.
Minister Keith Brown.
The next ScotRail franchise will commence in April 2015. Bidders will be required to develop plans to improve rail's integration with the wider transport system, and that of course includes improvements to facilities for cyclists. In the next rail investment period from 2014 to 19, Network Rail is required to work with partners to deliver improvements at stations through the £30 million Scottish Stations Fund, including more and better facilities for cyclists. Network Rail are continuing to improve facilities for cyclists at the stations they manage in Scotland, for example with the excellent redevelopment at Waverley Station, where they've arranged for pop-up maintenance workshops for cyclists and have been collecting feedback to help inform future cycling provisions.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and particularly about the pop-up workshops. In line with the as-yet fulfilled ScotRail franchise plans to include, and I quote, secure cycling parking facilities at every station, can the Minister confirm that these facilities will indeed be part of the new franchise and extended to stations in more remote rural areas? And can he confirm whether or not consideration has been given to separate cycle carriages for trains as used in Denmark for tourism, leisure and work, such as in the picture?
I think it's worth saying that the specification for the franchise is deliberately designed to encourage the bidders to come forward with their own proposals. There is, in some bidders' minds, a much greater emphasis on having access to bikes at stations rather than taking it from station to station on a train, as happens, for example, in Amsterdam. If you want to do that, you have to have, as the member suggests, secure cycling storage facilities. So we are encouraging bidders to come forward with their own proposals. But we are seeing developments like the Stirling Hub, which is an excellent new development which improves both cycling storage and the facilities to maintain cycle bikes, and also to tell people where they can go around the local area. So we're doing that just now, but the big leap forward can come with the new franchise.
Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister is well aware of the many cycling events and things that can happen in the Borders and the likes of Gala, Walkerburn and Glentress. With the opening of the Borders Railway, can I ask if he's in dialogue with anyone with regard to the storage of bicycles on trains?
Minister.
The same conditions would apply as in relation to the previous answer I've given, in as far as this will come obviously with the new franchise over and above the development of the Borders Railway itself. It will be the same as the rest of the rail network. There will be cycle storage facilities on board, and the franchisee will be required to balance this with the needs of both cyclists and non-cyclists. And of course there's an alternative Dalkeith cycle route to replace a pass which will be lost to the railway.
Mark Griffin, then I'm going to call Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Minister what work was done by the Government as far as legally possible prior to pre-qualification questionnaires to encourage a non-profit bid for the franchise.
Minister.
The member should be aware that we are not able to encourage one form of bid over another. To do so would be to breach the procurement regulations. What we did say is we were more than happy to receive a not-for-profit bid. We did make it clear that any not-for-profit bid that came forward would have to contain an element or a partner which had substantial experience in running railways. Beyond that, it's not for us to go and to specifically encourage bids. In fact, we're specifically precluded from doing that by European procurement law.
Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister's I'm a regular traveller, as the Minister is aware. On the train, basically, designated spaces for cycles and designated spaces for people with disabilities are often taken up by luggage and people with non-disabilities. What assurances can you give to cyclists and people with disabilities that these spaces will be prioritised for their proper use?
Minister.
The member will be aware that we have to balance the requirements and competing demands both of foot passengers, cyclists, wheelchair users and others on the available on-train space that there is. The current franchisee provides wheelchair spaces that can be reserved on longer express routes, and priority seating is provided in almost all ScotRail services. The assisted travel team within ScotRail can help make reservations and arrange assistance for individuals. In the next franchise period from April 2015, we'll continue to work to ensure rail services in Scotland are accessible to all.
Question 2, Nigel Dawn.
The Officer to ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to expand the network of cycle paths.
Minister Keith Brown.
The updated Cycling Action Plan for Scotland, published in June 2013, makes clear our commitment to the continued development of cycling infrastructure in communities, as well as the continued development of the National Cycle Network. The commitment was reinforced in the draft budget announced yesterday by the Finance Secretary. We were further increasing our expenditure on cycling infrastructure by £10 million in each of the next 2 years. And that is, just to clarify, in addition to the £58 million the Government's already allocated to active travel since the 2011 spending review, using the opportunities for further investment that have arisen. Local authorities, as the local transport authorities, have an important role too in delivering on infrastructure improvements in their communities.
Nigel Dawn.
I do, of course, welcome the extra funding announced yesterday. The Minister will be well aware that there are notable old railway lines running from Montrose south towards Arbroath and north towards Inverbervie. This seems to me to be an excellent opportunity for family recreation routes accessible by railway. And I'm wondering whether the Minister feels that that's something which the Government might be able to support, and whether indeed he might be able also to be able to support the access of European funding if that were available.
Minister.
Yes, of course. Last week, myself, I was on a previous rail line which is now used as a cycle track and for walking, and these are excellent opportunities to develop the cycle network. But it is the case that local authorities are best placed to determine what cycle routes should be developed in their areas, and where there are local opportunities to encourage wider participation in cycling, particularly for everyday journeys, I'd encourage these to be looked at carefully. As I've said, the Scottish Government is providing significant funding via the Sustrans Community Links programme, to which all local authorities in Scotland can bid for cycle infrastructure projects.
Question number 3, Claire Baker.
To ask the Scottish Government when it is meeting Clough Natural Resources and what matters will be discussed.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
As Energy Minister, it's a key part of my job routinely to meet with companies to discuss their plans for potential employment and investment as they relate to Scotland. Along with Scottish Government energy officials, I met with Clough Natural Resources on 27th of August 2013. We discussed Clough Natural Resources plans and understand them to be, Presiding Officer, at an early stage of development, and that no applications for planning permission have been lodged in Scotland by this company. As is routine in such meetings, I made it clear to the company that applications for development of any energy sources in Scotland will be determined on their merits. Each proposal will be considered through the normal planning process and the appropriate regulatory regimes.
Claire Baker.
I thank the Minister for the update. He will be aware of Clough proposals in Fife, and concerns have been raised by the local community along with environmental organisations regarding underground coal gasification proposals for Largo Bay and Kincardine. With international pilot testing resulting in contamination of local water, does the Minister share my concerns over potential mine water pollution in Fife, and is he confident that sufficient and robust safeguards are currently in place within the regulatory regime?
Minister.
Well, I would like to make it clear that plainly environmental issues are of extreme importance, and I informed the company that in these matters we take an evidence-based approach, considering appropriately environmental matters, and also encouraging any such companies to engage in appropriate community engagement.
Question number 4, Siobhan McMahon.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure patient safety at Monklands, Wishaw and Hare Myers hospitals.
The Secretary, Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, a review has already been announced. It will be carried out by Healthcare Improvement Scotland and will look at the causes and reasons behind the pattern of aggregated mortality statistics, HSMR, in Lanarkshire, which do not reflect the reduced mortality ratios recorded by other Scottish territorial health boards. It will identify whether any additional action needs to be taken or whether any aspects of NHS Lanarkshire's existing action plan need to be strengthened or accelerated.
Siobhan McMahon.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that since 2012, Health Improvement Scotland have been working with NHS Lanarkshire to reduce the mortality rate by 15% by the 31st of March 2013 from a baseline of November 2007? And can I also ask this Cabinet Secretary, when he first became aware of the potential problem with the above average mortality rates at Monklands and Wishaw, and whether these findings of any work undertaken by his will be published. Will he also outline what progress has been made to reduce mortality rate figures and ensure that lessons are being learned in order that these hospitals can continue to deliver a high standard of care to all patients?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding officer, obviously I can't say what the action will be until we've had the findings from HIS and NHS Lanarkshire, but whatever recommendations are made about improvement, they will be implemented because we are determined to ensure the safest possible hospitals in Lanarkshire as indeed elsewhere in Scotland. And I can also confirm that we will publish the report when it's available from HIS.
Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if the Minister is aware of the undercapacity in the neurology departments at NHS Lanarkshire, so much so that I've got cases where people are so worried about the length of time it's taking to have scans, etc., that they are putting themselves potentially into debt to pay privately to get these scans carried out. I wondered if the Cabinet Secretary would consider meeting with me and perhaps Siobhan McMahon and others in this Parliament to discuss the issues that are apparently there at NHS Lanarkshire in terms of undercapacity and try and reach a joint way forward for the benefit of all patients in Lanarkshire.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding officer, there is a wider problem about the capacity in terms of neurological consultancy capacity. I'm happy to meet with the member, indeed any member or collection of members, to discuss the specific issues in relation to NHS Lanarkshire, because clearly we don't want to be in a position where people feel they have to go private because they cannot get the service timiously from within the National Health Service.
Question number 5, Duncan McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Wellbeing last met the Chief Executive of NHS Glasgow and Clyde, and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Alex Neil.
Presiding officer, ministers and government officials regularly meet with NHS boards, including NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, to discuss matters of importance to local people.
McNeill.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply. As the Cabinet Secretary will be aware, in August 2011, the National Health Service Greater Glasgow and Clyde published its property asset management strategy, which showed a maintenance backlog in Port Glasgow Health Centre of £240,000, of Gourock Health Centre £20,000, and at Greenock Health Centre a staggering bill of £900,000, which surely puts it beyond repair. What can the Cabinet Secretary do to ensure that capital monies are targeted towards those areas with the greatest need to ensure they have effective community health services?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding officer, NHS boards have to work towards priority criteria, and I fully understand and appreciate the concerns of the member who represents one of the poorest constituencies in Scotland, and I'm more than happy to arrange a meeting with the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board with himself to see how we can take these projects forward faster.
Question number 6, Aileen MacLeod.
To ask the Scottish Government what consideration it is giving to methods of providing broadband access to the hardest to reach remote rural communities in South Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The Scottish Government with our partners are investing over £280 million in the Step Change programme, which alongside commercial deployment by BT and other operators will deliver next generation broadband access to 95% of premises in Scotland by 2017. This is expected to cover at least 95% of premises in Dumfries and Galloway and 93.8% in the Scottish borders. We've also established Community Broadband Scotland, which is a £5 million initiative that's supporting broadband rollout in those communities that will not have next generation access delivered by Step Change.
Aileen MacLeod.
I can thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer, and should be aware that this issue is being followed closely in rural South West Scotland, where many of the most rural communities currently have very low connection speeds. With one possible viable interim measure being distributed satellite broadband, will the Government look at ways of supporting communities which feel this may be an option for them?
Cabinet Secretary.
Aileen MacLeod raises obviously a matter of great importance to those communities she represents. I mentioned in my original answer Community Broadband Scotland, which is a £5 million initiative specifically designed to provide support to rural and remote communities to help them deliver their own broadband solutions. The CBS team includes 5 dedicated project officers who are providing very important on-the-ground support to communities across the country. So I would advise any community which is considering delivering its own solution to contact Community Broadband Scotland. I'd be happy to write to Aileen MacLeod, making sure that she and, by extension, our constituents have the full details of the support that's available to them.
Number 7, Helen Eadie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the number of local jobs that have been created as a result of the construction works for the 4th replacement crossing.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
During August this year, an average of 874 people have been directly employed in the project. Of those, 43% are from the Edinburgh, Lothian and Fife areas and 35% are from other areas of Scotland. These figures, of course, don't include the many others employed in the 365 Scottish-based firms which have to date been awarded subcontracts and supply orders on the project. Recruitment will, of course, continue throughout the project with all job opportunities advertised in local job centres.
Helen Eadie.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. Can the Secretary justify to this Parliament why it is that an accommodation ship is said to be moored in the River Forth with over 100 Spaniards working in the new Forth crossing, and a freight ship with all the requisite food from Spain denying local shops and businesses much needed trade against the background where Fife still experiences very troubling high levels of unemployment?
Cabinet Secretary.
I mean, I'm more than happy to meet with Helen Eadie and discuss any particular issues of local concern that she's got, but I really do think we should be focusing on the massive positive economic benefit of the Queensferry crossing that is being delivered not just to Fife and Edinburgh but to communities across Scotland. Let me just give a few statistics here that underline the importance of this project. As of June this year, 216 out of 368 subcontracts to Scottish companies. More than 9,000, almost 8,000 out of the almost 11,000 supply orders, that's 90%. We have 874 people directly employed in building the 4th replacement crossing. We see 365 Scottish firms already benefiting from subcontracts and supply orders with a total of about £143 million. These are fantastic benefits to local economies, fantastic benefits to Scotland, and I think it's about time Labour started acknowledging that rather than criticising the project.
Question number 8, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to vary the speed limit for heavy goods vehicles on the A9 trunk road.
Minister Keith Brown.
Available research shows that the average speed cameras will improve safety for all users, whether the HGV speed limit is retained at 40 miles an hour or increased to 50 miles an hour. However, our evidence suggests a greater reduction will result if the 40 mile an hour speed limit is retained. We have not ruled out a pilot scheme, as I've said before, to increase the speed limits of HGV vehicles exceeding 7.5 tonnes on single carriageway stretches of the A9 from 40 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, if the evidence supports that. And the A9 Safety Group is currently undertaking further investigation work to better understand the suitability of such an increase.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. The Minister is, I'm sure, aware of the widespread concern that exists in the Highlands and in Perthshire that the introduction of average speed cameras without addressing the question of HGV speed limits may actually increase the number of accidents on the A9 because it will add to driver frustration. I listened with great interest to what the Minister had to say. Will he undertake not to progress the introduction of average speed cameras without first seriously addressing this question of the HGV speed limit?
Minister.
I think I've already said that there is further evidence being gathered currently by the N9 Safety Group, which I think is the correct way to proceed. These are very serious matters involving the safety of motorists. We want to try and make it as safe as possible on that road. So the best way to proceed is to make sure that we garner all the evidence. I've said in the past in debates in this chamber that I'm sympathetic to the idea of a 50 mile an hour speed limit for various reasons, but we do have to proceed on the basis of the evidence which is there. And I should say as well, I've written today to all local MSPs and list MSPs to have a presentation to them if they want to come along to that, to talk about both the average speed cameras and the possible introduction of a 50 mile an hour speed limit.
If I could just remind all members that electronic devices, particularly mobile phones, should be switched off. I'm not looking at you, Mrs MacDonald. David Stewart.
Officer, as a road safety campaigner, I strongly support increasing the speed limit for 7.5-tonne HGVs from 40 to 50 miles an hour in single carriageways. Will the Minister think again about trialling this proposal on the Inverness to Perth section of the A9 to build up evidence for a wider rollout across Scotland?
Yes, I think I've actually answered that, but I would say that I hope the member who does have a track record in terms of road safety would agree that the best way to proceed on this is on the basis of real evidence, and there is current work being undertaken by the A9 Safety Group, and I think it's best to await that evidence and then decide how we proceed after that.
Thank you. We now move to First Minister.